that is that students felt like going across the world and doing something with their hands to change other people's lives was not only transformative as a learning experience, but gave them hope for the future and save someone else. It was like a win-win-win-win in about 5 different directions, particularly given that my charge is students. Right? Like it or not, I'm handed bunches of students every few years said, make them good people and smart people. And I try to the best of my abilities to do something along those lines. So that's what I did. Tsegaya, on the other hand, is something completely different with exactly the same charge.
I've been taking students also to Africa since 2008, every 2 years. And I'm originally from Ethiopia. I'm a conservation biologist by training. So as probably many of you know, Ethiopia, the vast majority of Ethiopia uses solid fuel as a fuel. And since about 2012, I wanted to do something about it. And so the project that I'm going to describe to you is based on that one. This is the students that you see that went to Ethiopia in August 2018 to pilot what we call improved cook stoves, fuel pellets, and charcoal buyback. And so we're going to tell you why we think this is a different kind of model than that has been practiced in introducing cook stoves and, around the world and in much of the developing world.
Okay, so this is obvious stuff. So now the frame. So you know what we did. We did some cook stoves and we did put a solar panel. So what's a big deal, right? I mean, it's ultimately not such a big deal. Maybe it transformed some people's lives. They got jobs out of it. Great, that is part of the job. But what did it actually do to the system itself? And everyone knows this, but I just say it in my usual way. Whatever it is that happened during the Industrial Revolution, when we went from no energy to a different form of energy, rather not fair, when we went from bioenergy to fossil fuel energy, whatever transition happened, we're going to make something similar to that in transitioning from fossil to whatever's happening. Quantum related, wind turbine, lithium ion related, the new technology, something's going to happen. The scale is absurd. The time scale, we don't know, but the size of the energy transition is going to be huge. And the throughput matters. We all know this. It matters who's got oil. It matters who's got nuclear. And all that means that the energy system transition is going to be huge. So I'm a systems person, but one thing that was intriguing to me about energy, and particularly carbon drawdown, which is like basically what everyone's worried about. How do we reduce the amount of carbon in the air because it changes the thermodynamics of the atmosphere? I realized that this is one of those rare things where you are trading across everything. You're making a shared decision across time, across people, because there's no such thing as I will fix my own carbon issue. There's no meaning to that sentence. And that's what makes this beautiful from someone who likes to think about local and global chaos and all that in my normal physicist hat on. And I wrote that just for fun, to see how many words I could string together and still have it make sense at the end of it all. But you know what I mean. We're sharing across a lot of space and time, including history, not just the future. The history of who took fossil fuel from whom, when, matters to the decision-making process. And there's very few things human beings do on this time scale, except things like the Shah Cathedral, which took 100 years to build, and someone had to have a vision to push in that direction, right? Or the famous Greek proverb, a civilization goes great when you plant the trees under the shade of which you will not sit, right? I mean, it's that matters. If you're looking to help yourself, well, okay, it's gone, it's over, because the time scale has to include the future. Because of this, so I told Johannes that he has a biomass gut feeling that translated into a systems flow. I have a teaching gut feeling that is translated into a soft power argument, okay, which is that what Alex and Gerlin achieved in Pondicherry, right, which I'll talk about later, was a soft matter trading of carbon debt that enabled both Pondicherry and Americans to benefit, while causing more carbon shift than virtue signaling by putting up solar panels on your own house, which we could have done. These guys could have happily put up solar panels on their own house and gone home and be done. And so that's my argument. The systems flow is better than static localized solutions. Okay, that's basically the whole point of this, whatever I'm babbling about, because I see this stuff. And the argument, everyone knows it. Everyone knows it, that the direct transfer of assets from energy, which people have benefited from fossil fuel, to people who need energy, just say, here, take the money, do what you want with it in terms of energy, just don't do fossil fuels. Would be the most efficient way to do things, but no one's going to do it. Because no one has the guts to do that politically or technologically. No one has the guts to do it. This is most efficient and incredibly most unlikely both ways. But traveling with offsetting activities, which is what they did, that's possible. Now it's tiny at the moment, but it's a start, right? It's a start, and that's my argument there, coming from here. And he is also doing traveling. So now we're talking about one sort of system that we're starting up. And then he's traveling, but he's less worried about the offsetting part. He's more worried about changing the biomass system, which is still connected to this traveling system, which is connected to the educational system, and the hope that these two, having produced two students sitting in the energy industry, now we've affected the energy industry in a ripple way, that in the long run, system thinking in that much more happy-go-lucky way, rather than the detailed calculation that you should do, or a much more happy-go-lucky way, rather than. And I just love this quote, so I'll just hold it up there, because one of the problems with traveling for offsetting activities is that it sounds very much like you're going on a service trip, a work service trip, and then you are confronted with the notion of the savior burden or the white man's guilt. If I was white, I would say that with more, directness. But the guilt of, I have to save you somehow, but the best part about carbon is that that's not true. Any money I spend saving someone else's carbon is like fantastic for me. It is, and plus, if I get more out of it, whatever at home, then win-win. That's what you said. Okay, thank you. All right. So how do you think about this? When you are doing an offsetting activity, what should you do? Just argue that you shouldn't offset by putting it on your own roof. That's a silly way to offset your flight. And you have to understand this, you have to understand multiple things, including the idea of a wicked system. I don't know, does that word ring around here? No, okay. Does complex systems mean something here? Okay. A wicked system is a complex system, which I will define soon. It's a complex system of complex systems, right? So like the economy. Yes, Alex?
I've heard it in terms of learning environments. So wicked learning environments are ones where your performance does not actually correlate very strongly with your own action.
Yeah, it's very
hard to learn.
Right, because, and oh yeah, a very good point. And there's a reason why it's wicked is because you push here, and because it's nonlinear, the result shows up there, and then you're like, well, that wasn't, and so it takes a long time to sort out what's going on. Like it's typical for any sensible socioeconomic, or again, I tried hard, and Tsegaya was making fun of me. An ethical, political, eco-chem, biophysical challenge, which is really about ethics, but it's about all those things in between. It's incredibly hard to keep track of all the elements of that, and so most people just sort of say, it's a system, it's wicked, I don't know what to do, I'll do local work. It's not an unusual way of thinking. Yes, please, I think. So let me tell you what a wicked system is, in 10 seconds or less, or 10 lines or less. A wicked system is linked and changing complex dynamical system. So it's a dynamical system. The number of actors and network interactions are large. This is easy and obvious. And interaction can feed back onto itself. So it's not just going to go out, I do something, and it increases the net effect on that side. For example, the famous VHS Betamax thing. If VHS moved just slightly faster than Betamax, so more people bought VHS tape recorders, and at the end of the day, VHS won for no conceivable reason other than its amplification of initial effect. So it's nonlinear and small changes in inputs can have large effects. If you memorize these things as a kid, like I did, Tanvi, I don't know if you remember, for one nail, the horse was lost, for one horse, the battle was lost.
That's the last one. Yeah.
The kingdom was lost, and whatever. And this, I wish I had time to do this, but you should listen to this song from my perspective. I think you can have a coexisting state. The same infrastructure can be humming along or broken. And the one I want you to listen to is, I don't know if you remember, Harry Belafonte is asked to get some water, and he says there's a hole in the bucket. He says, well, fix the damn hole. He says, okay, I need some straw. Okay, I need to cut with an axe. Okay, I have all those. The axe is not sharp. I need a stone. I need to make the stone wet. And you can hear the giggle in his voice when his wife or whoever it is yelling at him says, well, get water. He's like, the trap is sprung. There's a whole bucket. But the same thing could be working so beautifully if everything was fixed. So I'm saying, suppose coexisting states, same system, you either here or there. There's no such thing as in between. You can't have a non, and that's a nonlinear effect. It's not visible in linear systems where you jump from one state to the other with seemingly no way to transition through. You could not have completed the loop if everything didn't work, is the point, right? Living systems, wow, that was one of the fast, I wanted to say all that, but I got through it. Okay. Living systems are open. You know, if you're not producing entropy, then you're dead. I'm sorry. And even dead things produce entropy. Well, the only thing that, well, even rocks produce entropy, so I'm not sure what doesn't produce entropy. But a reasonable measure of liveness, healthy liveness is entropy production, including cities. If you don't consume energy, you're not a city. If you don't consume energy, you're not a country. If you do, and sometimes it's information throughput, which we call entropy, and that would be an organization. If there's no information throughput, then it's a dead organization, just in the same way. History matters. I won't go into that. You all know that. And the cool thing about wicked systems, or sorry, complex systems, is that there's a thing called emergence. Emergence is subtle. Emergence says that there are properties in the sum of parts that are not present in the parts themselves. And you might think, what does he mean? It's mystical. But it's very simple. The wetness of water is not in hydrogen or oxygen. Simple statement. Wetness of water is not in hydrogen or oxygen. Chemistry cannot make up stuff that physics doesn't like, but chemistry can deal with stuff that physics doesn't care about. Like, we care about electromagnetic interactions, and if you tell me there's something else that's happening, you're wrong. But electromagnetic interactions lead to wetness, cool, keep working. You know what I'm saying? There's a hierarchy of explanation in emergence. Chemists can see things that no physicist can imagine. But chemists can't see anything that a physicist says is wrong. That's simply not possible. You know, the explanatory power goes one way only, and the emergence thing goes the other way, by definition. New stuff happens when you go one way. So that's one of the major things in complex systems. The reason I said all that was because it turns out that if you apply basic thermodynamics, you can understand economics, at least from 1,000,000 miles away. And let's see if we can zoom in. There's a one-to-one map between any unit of one, so BTUE or barrels of oil or whatever unit you want here, and GDP, one-to-one. Or population, sorry, which as far as I'm concerned is basically one-to-one. And here's this counterfactual civilization not experiencing an industrial revolution, which I think probably Alex game for fun kind of thing. This is, I don't know, where you come up with such counterfactual, fair enough. Let's say it's, and then you can get, specifically focusing on the industrial revolution, is a one-to-one map between, this is, again, to me, blindingly obvious. You guys saw this first day of our class, I know that. And I know you remember what we saw after that. Keep going. And this is true even for fluctuations around means, such as countries and the wealth. And you can see outliers for obvious reasons. It's entirely obvious who the outliers are when you look at them for a while. Keep going. And this is temporal fluctuations also correlate, for example, which tells you this is more than just a vague correlation. This is a deep correlation. But then, I can show you correlation between any two things I want. For example, yes, please speak on that. Vision has very kindly put together spurious correlations for you just to enjoy yourself. And for example, there's a number of people who drown by falling into a pool correlates perfectly with the number of films Nicolas Cage appears with in any given year. Why not, right? But this one, of course, tells you that this is something going on. Basically, you can beat up data. You can torture data till it confesses to something or the other, as they say. Right? And so I threw that in just because it's half an hour. You're tired of listening to me make very heavy, serious statements, but also to say that I don't think a correlation between GDP and thermodynamics is as trivial. I think it's absolutely real, but I think you can actually get even better correlation. Yes, you want to go back? Well, next one, please. So here's my reminder of what thermodynamics says to energy systems. An energy system If it relies on solar power solely through biology, then it's an agricultural economy. If it relies on it through fossil fuel, then it's an industrial economy. And if it relies on it something beyond fossil fuel, then it's a post-industrial economy. So if you use quantum mechanics, photovoltaics, to harvest energy, you're post-industrial. Very strict in my world. And by post-industrial, I mean post-fossil, whatever it is, which may or may be in the future, present, depending on your perspective. And these are coupled dynamical systems. But it's both mass and energy dynamics, and you have to think about them very, very carefully. And some of the best mathematicians in the world have confessed to not understanding thermodynamics. So this is not like introductory mechanics or even quantum mechanics, which at the end of the day is not that hard. Thermodynamics is horrifyingly hard, okay? Sorry, guys.
It's very hard.
Speak for yourself.
The basic point is, in thermodynamics, you really have to know only two things. You can't produce matter or energy. All you can do is waste energy in a way we call increasing entropy, in a way I'll try to explain the intuition for in just a second. And energy always flows downhill. And what I mean by that is very simple. If I had something to drop, you don't have an expensive pen of yours that I could drop, Alex, do you? No.
Don't drop
No. So I have something here, and you know it's got a lot of gravitational potential in it, right? I'll let it go. It's moving fast. It won't break. That trust between partners. So there's a gravitation. Yes. So there's gravitational potential energy, and it's dropping, and you can see the energy going. And then where the heck did it go? Well, you heard it, some of it, that noise. So what is that noise? You have to think about this very carefully. I enjoy saying this because people get a little creeped out. The noise was there was an air molecule started vibrating and took that phonon of energy until the phonon was absorbed by your ear. If it wasn't absorbed, you didn't hear it. So you stole the gravitational energy of this thing involuntarily, whether you liked it or not. The rest of it is stolen by my hand. What does that mean? Energy is conserved, but can only go towards more sharing. In the sense that I think all of us would find it astonishing if all our ears suddenly flapped and this thing leapt up in the air. But that's not forbidden. It's not forbidden by conservation of laws. It's not forbidden by mechanics. It's not forbidden by physics. Weirdly, it's not. It's only forbidden when there's so many air molecules that it's practically impossible. If there were only 5 balls, it would happen. In the air in this room, there's only 5 air molecules, and there's one thing, sooner or later, it'll jump back up. But once you get to 10 to the 23 times whatever the heck's going on here, you might as well say it's never going to happen, right? So entropy is the only thing you can do. Energy flows downhill. And this remarkable Frenchman, Nicolas Sadi-Carnot, figured out a basic principle. You can take chaotic energy, just heat, and get useful mechanical work out of it. So it's like taking all the moving air molecules and actually getting work out of it, getting things to leap up, literally. But at the end of the day, you have less useful energy that you started with. You couldn't have possibly taken all the chaotic energy and made it work. So that's called the Carnot limit, and tells you why burning fossil fuels is always wasteful of energy in a very specific sense. It always goes downhill, right? Because energy is conserved, you might not. As opposed to say heat pumps, which move energy around, they don't produce new energy. Well, they do. The motor running this could be electric motor. It could be electric motor run off a solar panel, and now there's no fossil fuel burn for moving heat around, which is remarkable. And that's what we're doing at Carleton, due to some very, very, very lovely work of Martha Larson, who you work with, right? That was one example of a system flow. This is another example of a system flow. I'm going to set up Tsegaya here. Normally, you have sunlight coming in, absorbed by by wood, which for our purposes is just firewood. It's a pretty cynical perspective on trees. And then, stuff, they reject some of the energy. We compress it to charcoal, both for making it dense enough to actually light, and also for porting. I told my students, well, I told myself anyway, that you can always tell an energy economy when you see a human being on a bike porting charcoal. It's a very different energy economy than when you see trucks and gas pipelines, right? But who's more valuable? Is the human more valuable or the charcoal more valuable? It becomes very clear in that moment, when you see someone biking to transport charcoal in Ethiopia. You have charcoal, it's It's used in charcoal stove, it's out. So I would call this a very linear biomass flow. In and out. There's not much happening. We're having fun, my God, Anjiras are great, okay? And so, I'm going to have a blast eating. This is one of the worst steps, this is clearly an efficiency step. This is not a required step at all, except for we've always done it this way, in some sense, right? This is what I would call one of the steady states that exists because the system is, as opposed to the system that's being imagined differently, kind of thing. That's all. It doesn't need to happen. And then Tsegaya, I made him draw this thing because he doesn't think this way. But Tsegaya changed it without thinking this way, from his pure gut. And he's going to tell you about it.
I'm going to, I don't know how many of you actually understood what he's talking about. I never understand it.
That's what I'm going to say.
What I do is, I don't try to think big. I try to fix some small things. But he eventually said, hey, we could apply some system dynamics or stuff like that. I don't understand. So I'm with you on that thing. So what I'm going to do is tell you a little bit of the energy flow in Addis Ababa. This is, for example, as you could see, about 86% of the energy used in houses, in restaurants, is based on biomass. And by biomass, we mean charcoal, crop residue, cow dung cakes, firewood. And I'm going to spend a few minutes telling you the consequences of this extensive usage. Let me just give you one statistics. Every single day in Addis Ababa, 50,000 bags of charcoal enter, each weighing about 25 kilograms. To make 1 kilogram of charcoal, as we showed you in the previous slide, it takes 10 kilograms of wood. The conversion ratio is 10 to 1. So to make it dramatical, actually, every year, half the area of Addis Ababa, equivalent to Addis Ababa area of forest, is cleared, just to supply charcoal.
And regeneration rate.
Yes. And so now, why is that the case? As you could see in this slide, Ethiopia is the third largest charcoal producer in the world. And most of it is actually used in urban area. Rural people do not use charcoal. It's very expensive. They could go and fetch some wood and use it. But charcoal is an urban fuel. What is making it even more prevalent in cities around Ethiopia is that electricity is not reliable. It doesn't matter your socioeconomic status. At least 2 days a week, you have no power. And Addis Ababa is also, for most of the cities in urban area, is also about 2,400 meters above sea level. It gets cold at night. So it's not only for cooking, they also use it for heating. Now, here it is. And this is also another thing. Unlike many other places, Ethiopians actually cook inside. It's not because they love to cook inside. It is because it gets cold. I used to tell people, why do you think people actually keep livestock inside their home? It's not because for safety reasons. It is because the livestock heat up the house. So this is actually an average for the country as a whole. In urban area, the expense is about 20% of their income is spent on fuel. Now, what are the type of stoves people use there? Look at it. Ethiopia has about 107 million people. But by just simply looking at it, about 60 million people actually are using, 3-stove fire. Some, they build their own little stoves out of mud and whatever. But in urban areas, there is a huge amount of manufactured cook stoves. And I'll share with you a little bit of what those look like. And, this is again the same. And here are the stoves that are used. This is the lacquer charcoal stove on the right. These two are now the so-called improved cook stoves. Here is a firewood. 50% of the, how many of you have actually eaten Ethiopian food? The flat bread. Ethiopians use universally is cooked using firewood. Because the supply of electricity, even in Addis Ababa, is so weak that you cannot use electric stove because it has no enough power to do it. So it doesn't, you might go to Addis Ababa and have a big rich guy mansion. That's not where you should be looking at. There's a service rooms behind the big house where actually you will find this. All right. Now these are the improved stove. That is, for example, the Berkeley improved cook stove. This is also, it's called typical. It's also adapted. One of the things that I want to start and say is that most of the organization, NGOs, and many promote these things. And I want to tell you one story. In 2012, when I first started thinking about this, the German Zoological Society was the one who was managing the Bali Mountains. It's one of the wonders of the world. And so deforestation, the Bali Mountains provide water to Eastern Ethiopia for 12 million people. And if that forest is gone, everything is gone. And I don't have time to explain it to you, but, and so then the Zoological Society is there, and I went and I asked them, and so what are you doing about the firewood issue? Well, we established a workshop, and we have been developing one of these rocket stoves. So what happened? Well, it turned out that nobody is actually using it. And when we visited each one of these houses, people are using it for sitting. No, I'm not exaggerating. Then I asked the Zoological Society's guy, have you spent one night in one of these people's houses? I knew immediately what happened. The Bali Mountain is 3,400 meters above sea level. She knows it. You freeze at night. So you give an efficient stove, even if it is a rocket stove, and you may be able to cook, but you are going to freeze. So nobody used it. So another thing, I'm telling you what happened this last summer. I was in Ethiopia for 2 years as a Fulbright scholar. And the GIZ, you guys know it, the German International Development Agency, promote this thing. I was talking to the Ethiopians, and I asked, you promote any of these stoves? Do you use it? No. Then what makes you think that other people are going to use it? What makes you think that poor people do not like good stove? Right? Now, look at it. 60,000 Ethiopians, mostly women and children, die every single year because of indoor air pollution. Another 5 million suffer respiratory diseases every single year. And look the environmental impact of it. I just, forget about this thing. I want you to focus on the per capita charcoal consumption in Ethiopia since I was about born in 1962. It has not changed. Despite hundreds of millions of dollars spent in changing, in transitioning, what happened? How is it possible that you spend hundreds of millions of dollars and you have nothing to show for it? And what is more interesting is this. Ethiopia is the third largest country. If you actually improve cook stove, has the largest impact on climate. After India and China. Now, imagine we are talking about 1.2, 1.4 billion people vis-a-vis 100 million. It is the third largest. If you introduce improved cook stove, it has the largest impact on climate. So, what did I do? As I said, I don't know anything about systems dynamics and stuff like that. So one of the things, I will save you much of the trouble. Since 2012, I decided that I'm not an engineer. And I saw what many of these international or national organizations do as a cook stove. I said, I'm going to do it myself. The stove that you see this is a stove that I designed. It's a fan-forced micro gasifier stove. The thermal efficiency is about 47%. It burns like LPG. That is the first intervention we made. The second intervention we made in terms of the system dynamics that Arjun was referring to, I do not want to use. You need improved fuel, not only improved stoves. So the improved fuel is pellets, but how do you make it? If you go and buy a pellet, it actually is made out of real wood, cut wood. That's why now you are reading a lot of complaints about pellets. You cannot change that stove and then say, hey, everything is going to be fine. No. In fact, you will accelerate the destruction of the pellets, the forest. So the other thing that we did is that we definitely have to use waste biomass from agro-industry. I don't know how many of you know, spent coffee grounds is an excellent energy. In fact, it burns 54% more than hardwood. And fortunately, Ethiopia produces every year 386,000 tons of green coffee. And half of it is consumed in Ethiopia proper. So we drink a lot of coffee. So I did a survey several years ago. How much spent coffee grounds can I collect every day? It turned out that the minimum amount of spent coffee ground that I could collect is about 40 tons a day. And coffee husks, this is all coffee husks. Because Ethiopia processes a large amount of coffee, right on the periphery of Addis Ababa, there's mountains of coffee husks.
What do they do with it now?
They use it as a fuel because it's hydrophobic. It doesn't, but it will burn like it. If you have one sack of it, you will burn it in 2-3 minutes because it doesn't have much density. You'll just burn it. So that is the second thing. So we need to have an improved fuel. The source of it need to be a waste material from agro-industry, from coffee and a whole bunch of other things. The third element is when you burn these pellets in this cook stove, the byproduct is not ash. It's actually charcoal. For every kilogram of pellet that you burn, you can actually harvest 250 grams of charcoal. We buy back the charcoal from our customers, we activate it, we make water filters, air filters, and fertilizer. Why do we do that? Well, one of the reasons, if you read the literature on cook stove, they say, well, the cook stoves are not affordable. It is true. This cook stove at cost is about $60. But in my view, one should not start designing something by saying that, okay, Geraldine is the poor. So for her, it is enough about a $10 stove. No, you do it right. And then you find the mechanism to pay for it. So by every time our customers give us 250 grams of charcoal, we give them the same equivalent amount in forms of pellets. Okay? And because this biomass is collected, most of them are women, they also get money in the collection and providing of these fuels for us. All right? So now let me share with you some of the benefits. Assuming that we could distribute 10,000 cook stoves in Addis Ababa. Currently, we have only about 100 stoves in people's hands for the last 1 year. Look what it is. Reduced indoor air pollution by 95%. Fuel cost every day. 1 kilogram of charcoal in Addis Ababa costs $1. 1 kilogram of pellet with the charcoal buyback program, it only costs 30 cents for them. Cooking time, by 50%. And each one of our stoves eliminates CO2 emission 6 tons per year. If we actually start manufacturing this thing for 10,000 stoves, direct employment about 59, and indirect employment about 1,600 people. And of course, the amount of charcoal we could sequester is that amount. All right? Now, the employment opportunities that we wanted to avoid overhead. We are not going to open shops. We are not going to do any of those things. So all our product is sold using what we call aggregators. These aggregators are the same households who use our material. Suppose, for example, Geraldine lives in this neighborhood and she has, she is participating in our system. What we will do is that, hey, could you be our aggregator? In other words, find other people who want to participate in it. So since she cannot distribute all the products that we have, there are shops, we call them kiosks, every corner of the street. So we identify these kiosks that are near our customers, and we connect her with Geraldine. So we put the pellet there. So the payment directly comes to us. We tell Geraldine, hey, Argendo is ordering 50 kilograms of pellet, and that Argendo, she will tell the kiosk, which has a pellet, hey, there is Argendo coming to collect your pellet. And if that person has charcoal, it leaves it in that kiosk. In doing that, we actually created for 10,000, about 1,600 jobs. All right? Now, the question is, as I told you, injera is big. If you solve the cook stove, but you haven't touched the injera baking, you haven't solved the problem at all. So we designed an injera baking add-on that you could simply put on top of the stove. The only sacrifice we made is the standard injera is about 56 centimeters. We reduced it by 46 because the heat diffusion is going to be very difficult on a small size stove. If we increase the size of the stove, it costs us money. So it is the compromise. Now the good thing what happens is that people now no longer eat injera with a big flat. They cut it, they roll it and cut it. So the size no longer matters. Now, there is no such thing as a silver bullet solution. You have one stove and you have solved every problem you have. You cannot have it. Another thing that we did was here. This is a natural draft stove that we designed. This is your cooking surface, your cutting board. It has 3 burners. It has a chimney, and the interior of the stove is there. And this is tier 4 stove. The only thing you have to do is elbow the chimney to outside, because you cannot just simply rely on one stove. So you have now 3 burners on top of it. This one, I don't know if you could see it, is smaller. The reason it is smaller is that you could actually put the injera baking on top of it. It's modular. Now, the chimney here, it reaches about 400 degrees Fahrenheit. Why waste that energy? We designed a kettle for it. As long as you have the stove on, you will have hot water without any additional cost. All right? Now, where are we? I want to show you one of our customers' reaction to what she said. I'm going to translate it. She's 27, has 2 children. She's one of our early customers. She's been with us for a year. What she's saying is that I asked her, how's your reaction to this stove? I have no words. And so these are the other ones. So where are we now? We have acquired an industrial shed in Addis Ababa. We have already installed 1 ton per hour pellet line, all working. We have already ordered all the stove manufacturing equipment. It will be installed in Addis, hopefully in the next month or so. So we hope to start actual manufacturing of all the 3 things, the fertilizer, filter, pellet, and the stove by New Year. And most of it is, as Argento said, it's an ethical issue. I didn't get any money, I did it. Yeah, I'm there.
And the point is basically, how do you make this self-sustaining? You know, when Tsegaya finally stops moving, which will happen sooner or later. I think most of the coffee in Ethiopia must have gone into him. You know, but wait, at some point he's going to, I don't need this.
Yeah.
So this is just to remind me.
Yeah.
So just to say that, so what happens? You have to make it self-sustaining. And that's what he's trying to do, basically, right? Obviously, with creating it, once people see that it's worth it, with any luck with the economy, you spiral it up. You know. And this is now a tiny attempt to say that maybe what we did with what we call the well system in Pondicherry was similar, but with water, not carbon, or not biomass, in a very specific way. It started. It's a 6-year project, 7-year project. 2014, I started. 2016, 17, these 2 guys were part of 16 people who went there, and we put a solar panel on a guest house for a Tibetan refugee, which sounds like an extremely service learning kind of project. But in 2017, 2018, we went to the guest house and stayed in the guest house. They welcomed us with open arms for obvious reasons, because we had made that first step there and helped them make a better guest house. So now they could, you know, so loved us when we came back. And this time we installed a solar pump in the in that well. Sorry. What we did was actually kind of interesting. I'll describe it verbally. Maybe you can visualize it. So this is monsoon area, big dump of water. Everything washes out. You get some growth. End of story. Right. What this very clever farmer said was, if we dig out a hole, then when the water comes, it goes into the hole. There's water stored, but it's not very useful there. It has to go out in the fields. What they've done is all the mud from below, they built up a very tall storage system made of mud, and we put in a water immersible pump run by solar panels that pumps it up there. So now the water cycle is completely changed. Water that lands there during the wet season, during the extremely hot season, the solar panels move the water up. And then when they need irrigation, it trickles down. It's simultaneously storing energy up there, just like the natural water cycle does by storing it up in the mountains, etc., etc. It managed to mimic with a solar pump, which I thought was remarkable, and I enjoyed it thoroughly as intellectual exercise. And this was there, and this was, and we don't have time, so I won't go into this, but basically we changed something very critical about the cycle. So that's why I did it verbally. And the only thing is watching this, everything being affected by everything else, and they're having to run the solar pump with fossil fuels, possibly, blah, blah, blah. And what we did by putting that one simple intervention was change dramatically this bit. The water now stayed, and the electricity stayed, and they were disconnected from the government. And that is just amazing. And what has happened as a result, which it almost made me cry, because we were so lucky. Tamil Nadu government decided that our test run justified 20,000 farms doing this for 250 megawatts of flip. So I'm like, I'm going to fly for the rest of my life at this point. But of course, it is their project. We were just there at the right time, right place, going all the way back to you guys, So it was kind of cool. When you push at the right time, right place in the system, you can make a difference. That's sort of, we train basically over and over again. I'll get to you, Alex. Just want to make sure that I put this very nice French phrase up there for anyone who can read it, but it's really saying, for that which is to come, if I use the literal translation, for that which is to come, it is not for you to predict as much as it is to make possible. You cannot face the future with like horrified eyes saying, what the hell's going on? You have to walk towards it. As I think I used to say in Classy, which you guys haven't taken with me, some people think they walk in the future, some people think they sit watching the future come at them. I think we walk backwards in the future because I understand that. I don't understand this. And I just want to be clever about figuring out what the hell's behind me while we do that. And that's what this is about. So keep those. Thank you all very much for
Yeah.
for this opportunity to lather about new ideas. So, thanks. And of course, questions if you have space, time.
I have a question about making this self-sustaining. How do you plan to do that?
Yeah.
What is your approach to making?
The whole project.
Yep.
Here is an excellent question. There are two ways to do this type of things. If you try to make it, this is one of the arguments that Arjendo and I are trying to make. You have to make it two choices. Are you trying to make for impact, or are you trying to make the intervention for profit? There is no such thing as you could do it both, at least at a certain scale. At the initial scale, there is no way you could make this kind of project sustainable by itself. But if you look at all the funding organizations, they will ask you, give me a forecast. I have done hundreds of proposals. And I will lie too, because this is the Excel thing. I always say, okay, this time amount of income, it will be too profitable. I'll tell you, it's bullshit. I do it because that's what they want me to do. It's bullshit. To make this kind of thing sustainable, you have to have a minimum of 40,000 stuff on people's hands. A minimum. I have computed it. But to get there is not easy. I have applied, I'm not lying to you, I have applied hundreds of grants. So far, I got one grant for $300,000. Everything else is myself. Because people always ask you, is it profitable? Is it sustainable? I say, these poor people, the average per capita income in Ethiopia, forget about what the World Bank says. GDP divided by the population, it just doesn't work. It's about $100. You are asking these people to pay $60 for this store. So the reason I approached it this way is that with the charcoal buyback program, I reduced the cost by 25% for them. By involving them in the collection of the biomass, in the distribution of it, I provide additional income that can offset the huge cost associated with it. But how I will be able to sustain it in the future? Well, I'm 58 now. Maybe I'll be dead before I know. The truth. And so I'm extremely frustrated by all these people who say, we are coming to Africa trying to do X, Y, Z. Okay, we need a private enterprise to do this. Well, I have a company to do this. And then they will say, due diligence, come and do. Is it profitable? I say, of course it is. In my head, I know it is not. Did I answer you?
So, well, let me ask a follow-up on that.
Yeah.
Do you think in the long run you need some kind of a government mechanism to make
we are working with the government. This is actually supported by the Ethiopian Science and the Technology Commission. Otherwise, it's impossible for you to operate in Ethiopia. The good thing about the 40,000 stuff that I just told you, GIZ is interested to purchase our store for refugee camps in Gambela region. That is about 900,000 refugees there, which translates to about 180,000 families. In the northern part, the Norwegian Refugee Council in Shire, they also have expressed interest in purchasing this, our model. You may not like this. The Ethiopian Defense Ministry want to purchase our stuff for its soldiers. So if we get those things, I have no doubt it will be profitable.
So there's a parallel here, which actually we studied in class last week. We looked at 4 different container-based sanitation projects, right, that have been running for a long time. In Haiti, in Kenya, in Lima, and in Ghana. And with sanitation and toilets, it's the same sort of this what we call push products and pull products. And this is the push product and toilets are push products, right? They're both push products. And people have looked at sort of these models that have all been in existence with sales for between 5 and 7 years, right? And I think that it is worth it to understand that profitability and financial sustainability are not the same thing, because because if you think of transfers and regular transfers coming into an enterprise on a regular and reliable basis, then that enterprise is completely sustainable. It is not profitable.
Yep.
And I think that the other thing to kind of understand, and one of the most sort of sustainable with the transfer models in Kenya is one that actually has set up a dual enterprise, one of which is set up on a profit-making model, which is then kind of cross-subsidizing models that are not going to ever make a profit, right? And one of the toilet manufacturers that actually makes briquettes and sells it with container-based sanitation is being able to carry on growing its household market because it supplies large numbers of container-based toilets to refugee camps, which are bought on sort of a very simple, the same way, right? It's just how many toilets can you manufacture for us? And then if you think about it, it's a very large captive market. So in a way, it's a refugee camp.
And so is the army, isn't
right?
it? Static.
And in your case, what you have to kind of figure out is what's that loop going to be in your refugee camp, right? In the container-based sanitation system, you can create the same kind of a fecal sludge management system outside the refugee camp, and it can clearly provide the go to feed the market there. I think in this case, I would say hanging your hat on the sale of the briquettes or the purchase of the briquettes is a fool's errand. I mean, and this is just from something that I've watched in another push product over many years, and really examined maybe 5 or 6 different models that have tried to do something quite similar with populations that are no more rich than Ethiopian populations, right? And in some ways, cook stoves, you actually have the advantage because the effects are felt very directly by people, whereas health effects of missing toilets, etc., are something that people don't understand germ theory, let alone bacterial loads and things like that, So, I mean, just in terms of sort of thinking about how to reframe what it is you're looking at, I think, first of all, and I know you know this, and I know this, and the rest of us who study public goods and provision of those public goods know this internally, you have to get past sort of internal rates of return on push products and public goods. You have to push it away. You have to say, we're not going to do that. We'll do cost benefit analysis. We look at environmental rates of return. And that's the only way to justify it. So sort of just, say this is the truth. I mean, what is it that you're trying to do?
Okay, I'm Subodh Mathur. I'm an economist. I would disagree with you.
Okay,
it's not a push product at all. If it's a push product, you have the wrong product. You have to have the product that makes sense to the people.
Of course, but it doesn't.
Excuse me, no, it's not a push product. You need to make it a pull product.
That's true. You need to make it into a pull product, but right now it is a push product.
Let me just go on for a minute, right? It's not a push product. So that's the first thing. And secondly, the justification is it's economically sustainable. Right? That's the justification. Not that people are going to do this. If you do the economic cost benefit analysis, if you are actually getting 95% reduction, which I doubt, for various reasons, but let me not put my doubts here. If you are actually getting 95% reduction in indoor air pollution, this is economically justified. And that's the justification. Not that it's a push product or a pull product. It's a socially justified intervention because you are going to see reduction in health costs, and you are going to see productivity gains in the future, both of them. So the real question in my mind is the two real questions. It is economic. Are you getting the indoor air pollution reduction? Okay, let me just pose to you this question. That's number one. as for the coffee husks and all, this I buy completely. I know. We have
Yeah.
tried it in different ways to
Yeah.
generate electricity.
Yeah.
So we know all that. I mean, the ideas are not new.
No.
They have been very nicely packaged.
Yes.
Very nicely packaged.
It's a circle, right?
Yeah.
It's not any individual thing is very straightforward.
Everything is known.
Right.
I mean, I'm not in this business,
Yeah.
but I'm a casual observer. But even from casual observation, I see that these ideas are not new.
No.
And by the way, let me just dive in. People had told me 15 years ago that all commercial injera in Ethiopia is now with electricity. No,
No.
no. It was not converted.
No, it's not like a question of converted.
It's
You
not
can
available.
buy the electric metal,
Right.
but there is no power.
So you have to blame people like me who are supposed to provide the
Yeah.
electricity. Okay, but the real question is, are you getting this? Have you measured it?
Yes.
Have you measured
So
it?
we don't. We didn't have time to do that.
Yeah.
We every single day we have a PM2.5 measurement equipment
Oh.
hanging in people's houses.
Yeah.
Cool.
Everything we do, even for example, the calorific value of the pellets is measured.
Mhm.
The performance, the
We did that
thermal
for my physics
efficiency,
class yesterday.
the thermal efficiency of the stove. Every single thing I'm telling you is measured.
No, the thermal efficiency,
Yeah, yeah.
no issue.
No,
This
the-
is understood.
We hang, we have
The reason we put Deborah's
expensive.
name there is
Yeah.
because she's the PM2.5 expert.
See,
That's
the
it. That's
Yeah.
her.
reason I'm
She's
asking
the
this
part of the
question
site.
is because I'm working with two doctors now. I've started.
Yeah.
They have been doing this work with LPG stoves
Yeah.
in Peru,
What?
and they report only 50% indoor air pollution reduction, and 50% is not enough to get you any health benefits.
No, right.
It's like going from 40 cigarettes a day to 25 cigarettes a day, and that's not enough to get any.
Yeah,
right.
And all across we hear that you actually don't get the indoor air pollution reduction.
So
I
I
watched him do this. Well, I didn't watch it, but my students actually watched him do this just on
Yeah,
Tuesday.
on Tuesday.
On Tuesday, and he was like, it took too long for the black stuff to show up because there was wind. I was like, this is a good thing. It took too long for the black stuff to show up. On the students complained that the experiment ran too long because there wasn't enough black stuff.
No, but I will
So you can see
I will
the
agree with you one thing. It's very important that I mention this. One of the major problems that we encounter is that fuel stacking. So I'll tell you a small story. Ethiopians drink a lot of coffee. This is a very powerful stove. So to make coffee, it boils over and it extinguishes the stove.
Right.
And so I start thinking, how am I going to solve this problem? Because it means that redesigning the whole thing is going to be very expensive. I haven't told you all the costs associated. So I announced the reward system. And I went to the people, the 100 people who are working with me, and I said, I'm going to give a person who came up with a solution for this $150. Guess what they did? Ethiopians, she knows, roast coffee with a circular metal thing, and you roast it on. That lady, what she did was put that circular metal thing on top of the stove, and she put the javana, the coffee maker, on top of it. So she achieved the two things at the same time. She reduced the temperature. At the same time, in case it boils over, it falls on. She got $150 on it, and we announced it to everybody. Okay, that's one. So part of the problem is how, these kind of issues. We also designed a heater that you could add on top of it, because we don't want them to start a charcoal just for heating. So there is an add-on that we designed that if you turn it on, it has a radiant heat.
Right.
So it takes time, because this type of thing is extremely expensive. The injera metal, for example, to just design a prototype, it costs us about $40,000.
Wow.
Okay, now going back to you, I also was extremely worried about I don't need this thing for my income. I have an unemployed person, but I don't want to spend more money on it. I don't have it. So I wanted it to be financially sustained. So one of the things that we did was, it turned out that almost all the restaurants in Addis Ababa use charcoal and wood.
Yes.
And they have a huge financial incentive to use efficient stove.
It's not like a home. So we actually then started
Yeah.
giving multiple stoves to these small restaurants. We have now restaurants who use 3 stoves, 2 stoves, 4 stoves. Now the benefit is that one, they can pay directly for the stove.
Yeah.
Second, their fuel consumption for 2 stoves per day is about 8 kilograms of pellet. That's where the money is.
So that was my second
Yes.
question.
So now here is another thing. 100 kg DAP, or 1 ton of DAP, diammonium phosphate fertilizer, in Ethiopia costs us about $90 US. Now, if anybody, and I used to be an agricultural person, anybody knows about tropical agriculture, nutrient leaching is the most common problem. The vast majority of the fertilizer is leached away before it reaches the plant.
Yeah.
And so farmers don't have that money, especially in urban setting, and yet they don't get that much benefit for it. So one of the things that we did was, okay, we could solve this problem. Mix the diammonium phosphate, the DAP, with our biochar. Because because the surface area of the biochar, 1 teaspoon of activated carbon has the surface area of a football stadium. It has that capacity to absorb a lot of other things. So we mixed it. So water retention improved, nutrient release improved, and there's a lot of money to be made on it. The water filter, I'll tell you now, I showed you, is we put it in a tea bag for water filter. Each one of these tea bags is about 50 grams. Now, a bottled water in Addis Ababa costs us about 15 cents, half a liter. And you drink it, it's over. Our 50-gram activated carbon will work to filter water every single day for 20 liters for 2 months. And we sell it for about 60 cents. That's a huge amount of money. So that's why I was referring to you. The scaling up is the issue. The financial sustainability in the future, once we reach a certain point of stop, it doesn't bother me. What bothers me, I have no money now.
But why don't you sell to the restaurants?
No, that's what we are doing. That's what we are doing.
That's the question, because they actually have an incentive.
We start
Quite elsewhere, guys.
Yeah.
So you can continue this polite discussion some other time. Thanks so much for coming to present. This is very interesting, but I think we should let our staff go home.
All right.
Give them all the time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So does it purify the water? When you filters it, is it safe for drinking?
Yes, absolutely. Now, I'll tell you one little secret.